What is up, YouTube? It's your girl Evelyn, and due to the lack of Sapphic films and television shows dropping this month, I thought I'd go over some gay lady movies and TV shows that came out last year that you might have missed. Also, quick spoiler warning for all of these films, because while I don't spoil any major plot points, I do spoil some minor ones. Okay, fine, I also spoil some major ones too.
My bad.
I don't know what I've done.
A Mistake stars my girl Elizabeth Banks as Elizabeth Taylor, a somewhat frosty surgeon who makes a mistake in the operating room, and the consequences of that mistake end up being far more catastrophic than she could have ever imagined.
We did everything in our power, Richard.
I'm not sure women are suited to a career in medicine.
That's what this is about.
So surgeon Elizabeth Taylor is in fact a lady lover, and her partner Robin is a nurse who was also present during the accursed surgery. Not to mention, their relationship has to be on the DL because of work. And not to spoil the movie too much, but Robin
Ain't shit.
Now, despite having lukewarm reviews, I kinda liked A Mistake.
I thought it was okay.
Is this movie bleak as hell? Yes. Is the plot too simple? Probably. Does an adorable pet die for no fucking reason?
Why, Lord, why?
But even still, this just might be my favorite Elizabeth Banks performance ever. And for me, she's what made this movie worth watching. So if you're a fan of very serious, tragic, and overcast looking medical dramas set in New Zealand, A Mistake was literally made for you. Founders Day has to be one of the worst films I watched in 2024.
I'm not exaggerating.
It's supposed to be a satirical political slasher, but in actuality, it's just fucking terrible.
Founders Day.
Don't you dare lecture me about Founders Day.
Our girl Allison is the main character and main gay of the film, and she lives in a small, picturesque town where a very contentious mayoral election is taking place. Now, Allison's girlfriend Melissa gets offed in like the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Really?
And basically, the masked maniac who killed Melissa runs around for the duration of the film, randomly killing people. The thing is, Founders Day wants to be Scream so bad. Unfortunately, it's not funny like Scream, or clever like Scream, or even interesting. In fact, Founders Day might be one of the most boring slashers I've ever watched. Not to mention, it completely wastes its political setup. Like, the tiny amount of actual political discussion in this film is so tepid and shallow and possibly written by ChatGPT. Anyway, is Founders Day gay? Yes. Should you watch it?
Absolutely fucking not.
When I walk in the kitchen, my heart hits the floor, 'cause it's you that I miss.
All Shall Be Well is both an extremely sad and extremely frustrating film about a woman who unexpectedly loses her partner, then finds herself at odds with her partner's family, who are all evil, money-grubbing leeches. Okay, fine, they're not actually evil, money-grubbing leeches, but I still kind of hate them.
胡女士嘅所有資產都會由佢嘅近親所繼承。
咁係咪即係包括 Angie 而家住緊嗰個單位啊
Angie 可唔可以繼續住喺嗰度㗎？
呢啲遲啲先講啦。
So if you watch the 2020 French film Two of Us, then All Shall Be Well will feel very familiar plot-wise. But essentially, Angie and Pat have been together for 40 plus years and are very well off financially. They met while they were working at the same factory, and then they ended up owning the factory, because thus is the power of lesbians. Anywho, Pat passes away at the beginning of the film, and the rest of the movie is Angie squaring off against Pat's family, who themselves are poor as shit. And because gay marriage is not a thing in China, Angie isn't recognized as Pat's spouse. Therefore, Pat's destitute brother is granted control of her estate. And despite the fact that this movie raised my blood pressure by at least a mile, I still thought it was a well-made, incredibly acted film. And I know this isn't the type of movie that typically gets a ton of eyeballs or attention, but if you can take it emotionally, I highly recommend All Shall Be Well. Something in the Water is a classic shark versus a gaggle of squabbling frenemies tale that opens with a brutal homophobic attack on our main character.
Why, Lord, why?
Slow down. Stop the boat!
Something in the Water follows our girl Meg, who, like I mentioned before, gets her ass whooped at the beginning of the film thanks in part to her big mouth girlfriend. After said assault, Meg dumps her girlfriend, and a year later, they end up reluctantly reunited at a friend's destination wedding in the Caribbean. And of course, one thing leads to another, and the next thing you know, everyone's treading water and trying not to get their asses eaten by a shark. Now, as someone who hates the open water genre of shark movies, I was never going to like Something in the Water, but it's at least watchable, and way better than Founders Day, so that's something. And not to spoil the ending of the film, but also to completely spoil the ending of the film, the two lesbians are the only survivors. Now, if you can't get enough of films where someone loses their partner in the first 10 minutes of the movie,
Get therapy.
do I have a treat for you. Housekeeping for Beginners is set in North Macedonia and tells the story of Dita, a social worker who finds herself a reluctant caretaker to her late partner's two daughters. Despite having partner loss in common, Housekeeping for Beginners is nowhere near as sad as All Shall Be Well. In fact, I didn't find Housekeeping for Beginners to be sad at all. Probably because our girl Dita has to jump straight into raising two rebellious kids in a household full of vibrant gays, including her best friend Tony and his adorable but way too young boyfriend, along with three random-ass 20-something-year-old Saphics. Now, that's not to say Housekeeping for Beginners is not a serious film, because it very much is, if not sometimes outright difficult to watch. It deals with a lot of class and race issues because Dita's partner and her kids are Romani, as is Tony's boyfriend. And if you're at all familiar with the history of the Romani people, then you know they've been persecuted and discriminated against throughout Europe, and are still dealing with it to this day. Overall, I loved Housekeeping for Beginners. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year, but again, not always the easiest to watch. There are several gay lady documentaries that dropped this past year, so I'm just gonna do them all in rapid succession, starting with Fanatical, the catfishing of Tegan and Sara.
People came forward from all over the world saying they had been corresponding with Tegan for years.
It escalated to a relationship?
Yeah. Felt more sexual.
Back in the early 2000s, someone who can only be described as a straight-up internet villain began catfishing the fans of Canadian indie rock darling duo Tegan and Sara. So this internet villain was very convincingly pretending to be Tegan, going so far as to strike up actual romances with some of Tegan and Sara's fans, who thought that they were in a whole-ass relationship with Tegan. That would have been bad enough, but this fake Tegan was also hacking the real Tegan and Sara. They got a hold of sensitive documents like their passports, they leaked demos online, and they just knew shit that they should not have known. I thought Fanatical was an incredibly interesting, if not scary as hell, documentary. And even though I did like it, I thought the end was super unsatisfying. The next documentary up is Chasing Amy.
I'm directing a project about the legacy of Chasing Amy as an LGBTQ film.
Do you find the film to be authentic to the LGBTQ community?
I find it authentic to the straight dude who falls for a queer woman community.
Chasing Amy is a documentary about the film Chasing Amy, a rom-com about a lesbian who dates Ben Affleck, which is somehow a synopsis that applies to more than one movie.
Why, Lord, why?
Anywho, the star of the documentary actually isn't the film it's investigating, but it's filmmaker Sav Rogers, who has been obsessed with Chasing Amy ever since he was a teenager struggling with his sexuality. And watching the, albeit flawed, queer representation in Chasing Amy saved Sav's life. Overall, I thought Chasing Amy was a fairly sweet, quirky documentary with an adorable love story thrown in. So if you like documentaries and you don't hate Chasing Amy, I would recommend. And last but not least is Indigo Girls, It's Only Life After All.
When we started seeing together, an explosion went off and I was like, this is it. But something about what you had to be as a girl didn't fit in with what we wanted to be as the Indigo Girls.
It's Only Life After All is very standard rock documentary fare, and I don't mean anything negative by that. It's a well-crafted, edited, and entertaining documentary about the lives and career of the Indigo Girls. Now, obviously, their sexuality is a big part of the documentary, given that they were out during a time when not many of their peers, if any, were. But like I said, it's very much a rock documentary. There's music, there's talking heads, there's more music, there's more talking heads. And look, I like documentaries, I like the Indigo Girls, I like their music, and I really liked It's Only Life After All. And that is it for the video. Also, just to let you guys know, I did drop a video on Patreon earlier this week in which I go into way more depth about some of these films, so if that sounds like something you're interested in, please consider joining. As always, I want to give a quick shout out to my newest patrons, Mad Scientist and Naya.
Lost without you,
I also have to shout out my big spender patrons, Angel, Mary, Angie, and Lucia. And to all of you GL series fans out there, I just started covering Affair over on Patreon, so feel free to stop by and check it out. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.